right?
Okay. So yeah, today we will be learning about the human body system. So let's first start with a video and we will look at multiple human body systems and how they work together to make our body. So here is the video.
The human body is a complex network of cells, tissues, and organs.
So we watched a video, quick video about the body systems and what they are. So let's first look at the level of organization. So human body is the basic unit is comprised of cells. So cell is the smallest unit of life. And when cells gather together, they form a tissue. And when tissue come together, they form an organ. And multiple organs form an organ system. And multiple organ systems working together make organisms like us humans. So here is just a different level of life and how they can come together to form an organism. So let's look at the major organ systems. So I'm going to point out 11, but we will focus on only a few. So first we have integumentary system, which is just the skin, hair, nails, and they protect the body. Next is skeletal system. So those are our bones and cartilages. They support and protect our organs. We have muscular system. So it's comprised of our muscles and it allows movement in our body. And we have the nervous system, which is made out of brain, spinal cord, and nerves. And it controls all of our body activities. We have endocrine system. An endocrine system is made up of glands like thyroid and pancreas, and they are responsible for producing hormones. We have also the lymphatic or the immune system. So they are made up of lymph nodes and spleens, and they defend against diseases. So we have five more here. We also have the cardiovascular circulatory system, which is made out of heart, blood, and blood vessels. They transport nutrients and oxygen. We have the respiratory system, made up of things like lungs, bronchi, trachea. They bring in oxygen and remove carbon dioxide. We have the digestive system, like we've seen. It's made up of our mouth, esophagus, stomach, the intestines. They break down food for energy. We have the urinary or excretory system, made up of our kidneys, bladder, and urethra, and it's responsible for removing waste and controls water balance. And finally, we have the reproductive system, made up of different, it depends on different sexes. So females have ovaries, males have testes, and they're responsible for producing offspring. So here I have listed 11 major organ systems, but today we will focus on these four systems: the respiratory system, the cardiovascular system, the digestive system, and the reproductive system. But the other systems are also important, but we will focus on these major ones. Okay, so the respiratory system. The respiratory system brings in oxygen and removes carbon dioxide. We have two lumps of lungs, and each human lung contains about 300 million alveoli. So alveoli are the small sacs we will see that are attached at the end of the branches. But there are 300 million of those in our lungs. And that is really impressive. So let's look at how the respiratory system works. So first, you inhale oxygen through your nose or your mouth, and it enters this nasal cavity if you breathe in through your nose. And then the oxygen travels to your lungs, so it passes all these structures, the pharynx, larynx, and it goes down the trachea into each lungs. And our body's cells use oxygen to make energy. So oxygen is very important in life. And so the oxygen exchange occurs at the end bulbs or little sacs called alveoli. So small sacs. But this is where the carbon dioxide is removed from our body and oxygen enters. And you exhale, breathe out to remove carbon dioxide. So the process and the order you need to know is that from nose in the nasal cavity, it goes down to cross the pharynx and the larynx, and it goes down the trachea or the windpipe, and then it enters the bronchi and then spreads out into bronchioles into alveoli. So this whole process, basically, you take in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide. So let's see how the alveoli works. Alveoli look like this. You can see they are these small balloon-like structures at the end of the bronchioles, and their walls are extremely thin, and they are covered by capillaries. And capillaries are small, tiny blood vessels. And between the capillaries and the alveoli is where gas exchange occurs. So remember, our body wants oxygen. So oxygen from the alveoli enters our capillary, enters our blood, and carbon dioxide in our blood is moved into the alveoli and out of our lungs. So we breathe out. So we breathe in, take in oxygen, and exhale, breathe out carbon dioxide. Yeah, I hope this makes sense for everyone. Um, so let's move into some of the questions. Let's start with a simple one. So the primary purpose of respiration in a person is it to take in oxygen, release carbon dioxide, or regulate body temperature? So which of these is correct? I think I heard D. Um, did you say D or B? Yeah, if you said D, that is correct. Um, the purpose of our respiratory system is to, yes, take in oxygen, that's right. Yes, release carbon dioxide, but it's not really to regulate body temperature. So, regulating body temperature is not the primary purpose of respiration. And the main system for temperature control are circulatory and nervous systems. But respiratory system is mainly for taking in oxygen, releasing carbon dioxide. So yeah, great job, everyone. Let's look at this question next. So this was from the most recent BEC exam. Um, it is asking about germs that infect the respiratory system are frequently spread through mucus, air pollution, coughs. So which of these do you think is correct? Um, I hear C. Um, I think there is a split between C and B, maybe? Or okay. So this might be a little bit confusing, but the answer is D. Is so it is all mucus, air pollution, and coughs. They can all spread germs. So mucus is a thick, slippery fluid produced by the mucous membranes of the respiratory system. And it comes out of your nose or your bronchi, and it helps trap the dust and germs to protect our body from infection. So the mucus itself can have germs that can be spread. And of course, air pollution irritates and damages the lining of the nose, throat, and lungs, and it is easier for viruses, bacteria, and germs to enter our body. And of course, coughs can also spread germs. So here are droplets containing viruses, and when you cough out, they can spread it. Okay, yeah. Lastly, let's look at this question, this theory question. So this one is about labeling. Okay, so the system, of course, we can tell that it's a respiratory system. Can you guys see that these are the two lungs right here? Yes. Yes, so let's name each of the parts labeled 1, 2, 3, and 4. So who knows what this is? The part labeled 1. So I can go back a few slides. Let's look at this diagram here, or this one. I think, yeah, you said um pharynx, but that was close. We actually start with the larynx. So I think I heard a pharynx, but let's look at the diagram again. So pharynx is closer to the nasal cavity than the trachea. But the larynx here, it connects the trachea from the nasal cavity and the pharynx. So larynx is at the most bottom and it is connected to this windpipe trachea. Yeah, so that's why it is the larynx. But so what is this structure here, number two? Yeah, great job. Yeah, that's right. It's the trachea. Nice job. It is connected to the larynx, and its job is to transport the air down to our lungs. Does anyone remember what number three is? This one right here. These parts. 어, 맞췄다. Oh, yeah, great job. Yeah, there's a bronchi. Bronchi is plural, and singular you can call one of them bronchus. Yeah, that's right. Great job. And finally, what is this part here? Just the large. Yes, that's right. It's an easy one. It's the lungs. So yeah, great job, everyone. And the third one, it says to name three diseases that affect the system, the respiratory system. So, do you know any diseases, or I can list a couple for you to know? So, yeah, there are actually like hundreds of diseases that are related to the respiratory system. But yeah, I haven't covered any diseases, so let's look at a few. So there is the disease called pneumonia, which is the infection of lungs and the alveoli. There's influenza, tuberculosis, or also a common cold. So if you've had a cold, it's an infection of our respiratory system. There's also bronchitis. Lung cancers can also occur. And the whole COVID-19 pandemic was also a respiratory infection. So these are all examples of respiratory diseases. 네 번만 다듬으면 돼. So yeah, I hope you were able to copy it down. Um, but these are just some examples. You don't need to know everything. So let's look at this last part of our question. So this one's a little difficult, but does anyone know what is the role of the larynx? What does the larynx do?
Yes. Voice. It's different voice.
Yeah, so there are multiple functions of the larynx. Yeah, first off, it is used for voice production. So every time you speak, the sound is controlled and produced by the larynx. It also controls our breathing, and it also protects the airway. So the larynx closes when we swallow to prevent food from entering the trachea. It acts as an additional protecting layer. So yeah, here are some of the roles of the larynx. So yeah, that was it for the respiratory system. Um, does anyone have any questions so far before we move on? Um, if there are no questions, I will be moving on to the cardiovascular system or the circulatory system. So the cardiovascular system pumps blood through the body, bringing oxygen and food to cells in all parts of our body, and then removing our waste. And the circulatory or cardiovascular system includes heart, blood, and blood vessels. So let's look at this video, and this shows how the circulatory system looks and how it functions. So let's take a quick look.
This is the most advanced fleece ever invented. That's because
So we saw the cardiovascular system, and the main pump or the source of cardiovascular system is the heart. So the heart is a strong muscular organ that works like a pump to circulate blood all around your body. And the heart has four chambers. This part right here is the right atrium. And the part bottom below is the right ventricle. Over here is the left atrium. And below that is the left ventricle. So you can see there are four chambers. I think this picture is better, but you can see the four chambers that are in the heart. So the heart beats about 60 to 100 times per minute, and it works non-stop to keep you alive and healthy. So even when you are asleep, doing other things, the heart is constantly beating. And this continuous pumping keeps oxygen, nutrients, and hormones moving to all parts of our body. And it helps remove waste products like carbon dioxide. So let's look at the blood circulation process. So how does the heart circulate our blood? Well, we talked about the four chambers, but let's look at the order of how the blood travels. So the blood enters our heart through the veins called superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. So superior means the top, so it is this vein entering the heart. Inferior means bottom, so it enters through here from the bottom. After entering the blood entering from the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava, it enters the right atrium right here. Let me see if I can. So it's right here, that is the right atrium. And then the blood flows to this right ventricle over here. And after blood entering the right ventricle, it flows through here to the left and to the right. Do you see this? So it spreads. So this artery is called the pulmonary artery. Those are the arteries, the blood vessels, leading from the heart to our lungs. So all of these go to our lungs. So we have lungs over here, lung over here. So both of them goes to the lungs. And it's important to note that in this process, every blood has low oxygen. It's deoxygenated. But in the lungs, gas exchange occurs, and now the blood is oxygenated. So after coming back from the lungs, the blood enters the left atrium over here. And then it enters the left ventricle over here. And the blood is exited through the heart by this chamber here. So this part over top, and that's called the aorta. And the aorta leads to every part of our body. So the oxygenated blood the blood containing oxygen leaves to every part of our body. And then it returns once again through the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava, and the cycle starts again. So yeah, this whole process of just the heart, the blood from the heart going to the lungs and back is called the pulmonary circulation. So this pulmonary circulation carries deoxygenated blood away from the heart to the lungs and returns oxygenated blood back to the heart. So here you can see the gas exchange occurring. So we already looked at the alveoli. And now we can tell that the blood in has deoxygenated blood. And then after crossing the alveoli, the bloods are oxygenated. And they come back. And pulmonary arteries carries deoxygenated blood. And pulmonary veins carries oxygenated blood. So let's look at this theory question. So yeah, let's look at figure 1a over here. It is an illustration of a mammalian heart. And it says to state one function for each of the parts labeled 1, 2, 9, and 10. So let's look at 1 first. Does anyone remember what this is? 1, right here. This part. Yes, that is really close. So pulmonary artery is actually number 10. So this is pulmonary artery right here on the left. So what is this one on the right? So I can show you the picture again. So it is this one. It's the chamber that leads to every part of our body. So yeah, so it's leaving the heart from the left ventricle. So what comes after the left ventricles? Yeah, it's the aorta, right? So this part is actually the aorta. So let's look here. So the aorta transports blood, the oxygenated blood from the left side of our body to the rest of our body. So yeah, one is called the aorta. Okay, I think what is this part right here labeled 2? Number 2. Yes, that's right. I heard pulmonary vein. That's correct. So PV stands for pulmonary vein. Yeah, great job. It returns to the heart, so it is a vein. But this particular one is called the pulmonary vein. And let's look at number 9. So this one, it's can be a little difficult, but do you remember what this part is? Number 9. 빙이랑 알투를 기억하면 이게 막 노트에 적고 있어. 그래서 막 외우고 천천히 하는 게 나아. So we're looking at this part, this channel, not the chamber of right atrium. So I will help you look at this. So we can also look at here. So what is this part entering the right atrium called? Oh, yes, I think I heard superior vena cava. That's correct. So number 9 is the superior vena cava. So that is the vein that enters our heart. And superior again means above. So every blood vessel from above comes through the superior vena cava. And you guys already answered number 10. It's the pulmonary artery. So this part is pulmonary artery. It goes from the right ventricles to the lungs. It's going to the lungs. So, yeah. So here are the functions of the parts that you've labeled. So the aorta carries oxygenated blood from the heart to our entire body. Pulmonary vein brings oxygenated blood from the lungs back to our heart to the left atrium over here. Superior vena cava brings deoxygenated blood from the upper part of our body to the heart to our right atrium. And there's, remember, the other part for vena cava. There's also the inferior vena cava, or IVC. And this vena cava brings blood from the lower part of our body to the right atrium as well, both to the right atrium. Finally, the pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated blood from the heart, from the right ventricle to the lungs. Okay, yeah, those were some of the functions of the structure of a heart. Yeah, great job, everyone, for getting these correct. And the part two asks to briefly explain why the left lower part of the heart has a thicker muscle. So can everyone see that the left part has a thicker muscle than the right part? Yeah, that is because the left ventricle is connected to the aorta, and the aorta is responsible for pumping blood to all of our body, connecting it to every part of our body. So the left side ventricle must be strong to squeeze all that blood to the rest of our body. Yeah, I'll wait a few seconds for you to finish up writing if you want to. But I will also share you the slides so you can copy the notes from the shared slide as well. But let's move on to this systemic circulation. So before, we've only talked about the pulmonary circulation from the heart to our lungs. Now, the systemic circulation is the flow of blood from the heart to the rest of our body and back to the heart. And it carries oxygen-rich blood to all parts of our body and brings back oxygen-poor blood. So you can see from the picture that from the aorta, it leads to our heads and arms, at the top, heads and arms, and it leads to the lower part, to our digestive tract, liver, and every organ, kidneys, legs. So systemic circulation carries blood to all parts of our body. So they're comprised of blood vessels, right? The cardiovascular system is made up of heart and blood vessels and blood. So the blood vessels has three main types. We've looked at arteries, which carry blood away from the heart. And it usually carries oxygen-rich blood. But the exception to that rule is the pulmonary artery. Pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated blood to the lungs. But pulmonary artery is the only exception. This is the exception. But other than the pulmonary artery, all the other arteries carry oxygen-rich blood. It has a lot of oxygen. Arteries also have thick, elastic walls to withstand high pressure. But the second type of blood vessel is called the veins. And the veins carry blood toward the heart. And veins usually carry oxygen-poor blood. And again, the exception to that is the pulmonary vein, which contains oxygenated blood. This is also the exception. other than the pulmonary vein, all the other veins carry deoxygenated or oxygen poor blood. And veins also have thinner walls and valves to prevent backflow of blood. And finally, we also have capillaries. They are these tiny, thin-walled vessels that connect arteries and veins. You can see in the picture right here. You can see the picture on the top right. So it has the artery, and it leads to a web of capillaries. It has all of these small vessels are called capillaries. And then they join back together to form a vein. So this capillary is where exchange of gas occurs, exchange of nutrients and waste also occur. And it happens between blood and body tissues. So capillaries have walls of only 1 cell thick, and it makes these exchange easier. So yeah, we looked at all 3 of these blood vessels. And I will also share you the slides so you can copy it down maybe later. But let's look at some differences and similarities between arteries, veins, and capillaries. So arteries have thick walls with lots of muscle fiber and its elastic tissue. Because arteries are for pumping blood, it needs to have thicker walls. It has small lumen, and it carries blood away from the heart. So veins, on the other hand, have thin walls with muscles and elastic tissue. It has large amount of lumen, and it carries blood back to the heart. And it also contains the valves. Lastly, the capillaries are the very small blood vessels. They're only 1 cell thick, and they connect arteries and veins. So yeah, this is pretty straightforward. But let's look at this question from the BECE exam. So, which of the following statements distinguishes arteries from veins? Is it A, arteries have relatively narrow lumen, while veins have relatively wide lumen? Is it B, arteries transport blood to the heart, while veins carry blood away from the heart? Or C, arteries carry deoxygenated blood, while veins carry oxygenated blood? Or D, arteries have valves, while veins do not have valves? I think I heard, yeah, D, but let's look at it closely. So it's saying that arteries have valves. Oh, B? Let's look at B then. Okay, so arteries transport blood to the heart, while veins carry blood away from the heart. Um, but this is the opposite, isn't it? The veins carry blood to the heart, and arteries carry blood away from the heart. So this two should be switched. This goes here, this goes here. So B is unfortunately not correct. So what else do you think? Oh, yes, that is right. The answer is A, because let's look at the differences here. Arteries have small lumen, and veins have larger lumen. So the size of it differs. And it matches here. The arteries have relatively narrow lumen, while veins have relatively wide lumen. So the answer is A for this one. But other differences to note is that, veins have deoxygenated blood, so it appears darker. So you can see in the picture here on the right, this venous blood is darker than the arterial blood, or the blood from the arteries. That's because arteries contain oxygen. That's why it appears bright red. Now let's look at this next question. So which of the following heart conditions in humans is caused by plaque deposits in the arteries? Yes, what's caused by the plaque deposits? So, yeah, this one we didn't cover, so the answer is A. So, atherosclerosis is a chronic and progressive disease in which plaque builds up inside the walls of your arteries. So here, you can see the plaque building up in the arteries. And the plaque makes the arteries narrow and harder, which reduces the blood flow. And if the plaque breaks, it can cause blood clot, and that can lead to heart attacks and strokes. But the heart condition in which the arteries are blocked by the plaques is called the atherosclerosis. So it's one of the diseases. But let's look at quickly the contents of the blood. So the blood is made up of the blood cells, like the red blood cells, white blood cells, and the platelets, and also plasma, this liquid. So plasma makes up around 55% of our blood. Red blood cell makes up around 41%. And there are also white blood cells made up of around 4%, and platelets even less. So let's look at this quick video. It shows you the major components of the blood.
Blood.
So yeah, that
Missing
was
shots.
the video. So yeah, that was the video of the major components of blood. So we've seen that there are red blood cells, which carry oxygen from the lungs to the rest of the body and brings carbon dioxide back to the lungs. They're responsible directly in carrying oxygen. There are white blood cells, which fight germs and infections to keep you healthy. And they produce antibodies. They produce these things called antibodies to destroy harmful invaders. There are different types of white blood cells, like neutrophil, lymphocyte, monocyte, eosinophil, and basophil. All of these are examples of white blood cells. So red blood cell carries oxygen. White blood cell fights germs. Okay, there are also platelets, and these small component helps your blood clot by stopping the bleeding when you get a cut. So when you have a cut, it may be on your fingertip, then the platelets gather in the area of the cut and tries to stop the bleeding. And finally, there is the plasma, which is the liquid part of our blood. It is mostly water, but it also contains things like proteins, nutrients, hormones that are floating, and waste products. So these are the 4 components of the blood. But let's look at this question about the blood. So which of the following substances are major components of human blood? The hormones, platelets, plasma cells, white blood cells. Yes, that is correct. Yeah, great job. It is D. So platelets, plasma, and white blood cells, all 3 of these are in the blood, right? We just looked at them. But hormones are not really a major component of the blood because there are only a small amount, and the blood has hormones only because it is carrying them to other places. But it is not really a major component. Okay, yeah, great job, everyone. Let's look at this question. The function of the white blood cells in humans is to do what? Yeah, so I'm hearing answers between B and C. So is it B or C? So yeah, if you said B, B is not correct actually, because blood clot during an injury is from platelets. So they are called platelets. So they ensure blood clot during an injury, but white blood cells produce antibodies to engulf disease-causing organisms. Remember that white blood cells' job is to protect our body. So it fights with other germs by either producing the antibodies or maybe attacking the germs themselves. So if you're also wondering about what a hemoglobin is, an A, hemoglobin is a protein that is on the white red blood cells, and it carries oxygen and carbon dioxide. So those are just proteins on the red blood cell, not the white blood cell. Platelets. So does this make sense to everyone? Does anyone have any questions? So if there are no questions, let's look at hypertension. So hypertension is also called a high blood pressure. It happens when the blood pushes the artery walls too hard for a long time. And if hypertension is untreated, it can lead to serious health problems like heart attack, stroke, and kidney disease. So the normal blood pressure is less than 120/80. So 120 is the top part is called the systolic pressure, or the pressure when the heart is squeezed. And diastolic pressure is when the squeezed part is released. So typically it's this number here. But in hypertension, the systolic pressure increases to above 140. And this is according to the WHO criteria. And diastolic pressure is above 90. So it is for patients with hypertension, the blood pressure is above 140/90 or more above. So what are the treatments? How can you treat hypertension? One way is to modify your lifestyle. You have to change your habit, or you can take medication. So things you can change. You can have low fat diet, low salt diet, eat healthy food like vegetables, eat regularly, quit smoking, limit alcohol, and things like that. So yeah, let's look at this BEC question about hypertension. So this was from the most recent exam. So a patient has been diagnosed of hypertension. Which of the following readings is most likely to be the patient's blood pressure?
E. E.
Oh, yes, that is correct. I think I heard D, and that's right. Because according to the WHO criteria, systolic needs to be above or equal to 140. Diastolic must be above or equal to 90. So it is 140 or over 90 or above. It's also correct if it says like 150/90, 150/100, things like that. But yeah, great job. Let's look at one more problem. So patient's blood pressure, when measured, read 150/90. State the significance of the values. So what does this tell you about the patient? And also state free remedies or ways that could be recommended to the patient other than medication. So I think the first part is relatively simpler. So the significance of hypertension, we can look at the significance of the high blood pressure, which is hypertension. So if blood pressure is high and it continues, it increases, remember, the risk of heart disease like stroke and kidney damage. That's why it is significant. And what are the 3 remedies? Well, like we've talked about, we can manage low salt diet. Things like eating healthy food, exercising, quitting smoking, limiting alcohol, and managing stress. So yeah, those were the questions about hypertension, and that was the circulatory or the cardiovascular system. Finally, we have the digestive system, which we will finish up today. So the digestive system, this last one for today, will break down food into nutrients that the body can use for energy, growth, and repair. So yeah, let's look at this video to see the digestive system in action.
DJ Furby! Snuggly, cuddly, and ready to party! DJ Furby, batteries not included.
Work is a pain in the ass. My files are in this app. My chat's in this app.
Oops. Excuse me. Oh, hello friends. Have you ever wondered, where does the food go once it enters your body?
That was a short video about the digestive system. So we did get a introduction. So here are the processes in a little bit more detail. So our digestion starts from our mouth as we chew down the food. We chew the food and it mixes with saliva, which contains some digestive enzymes. It goes down the esophagus, transports food from the mouth to our stomach, and this stomach here is where the food is digested by the acids and enzymes present to break it down into a liquid mixture. Then it goes to the small intestines. All of these squiggly lines are the small intestines. Here is where it absorbs the nutrients from the digested food to the bloodstream. Yes, can you hear me? Sorry, I think. Okay, yeah, I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so I was just saying that the mouth is where the chewing happens and mixes with saliva to aid the digestion. And esophagus is where the food is transported from the mouth to the stomach. And the stomach is where the acid is secreted and enzymes are mixed to break down the food. And it leads into the small intestines. All these squiggly parts are the small intestines. This is where it absorbs the nutrients from the digested food into the bloodstream. And then finally, this whole thing leads to the large intestine. This large intestine absorbs water and forms solid feces, and the anus is where it controls the release of the feces. So, in the middle, there's also the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas. So they are also part of the digestive system, as they each produce enzymes, digestive enzymes, to the small intestines. So the liver produces bile to help digest fats and remove harmful substances. The gallbladders store and release the biles to the small intestines. And the pancreas produces digestive enzymes and insulin. Okay. So that was the basic process of digestion. But there are multiple nutrients of food that can be digested. So there are carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins, minerals, and water. All of these are digested in our body. Well, most of these are, and some of these are exited through feces, but the energy-giving nutrients out of these are the carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. So the proteins are digested by the process that happens usually in the stomach that converts to amino acids. So amino acids are smaller molecules of proteins as a larger whole. So the amino acids are the end products of proteins. So there's a whole protein mix, but then it's broken down into multiple amino acids. It starts breaking down in the stomach, where acids and enzymes begin to break down the proteins. And it continues in the small intestines, where proteins are broken down into amino acids by the pancreas, the pancreatic enzyme. And the amino acids are then absorbed into the blood. So let's see how this happens. So we have this whole jumble of proteins over here. In the stomach, they're broken down into these polypeptide chains. And then they're broken down even further. And in the small intestines, these are amino acids, the smaller ones over here. It's broken down further. And each of these balls of amino acids enters our blood. This is our blood here. So that is how our nutrients get absorbed, our proteins get absorbed to our blood. And remember that all of this digestion, the absorption of nutrients, happen in the small intestines. Small intestine is where every nutrient is absorbed. And if you take a closer look, the small intestines has these things called the villi. These are these tiny protrusions in the lining of the small intestines. But in the villi, there are also these microvilli, the smaller ones, and they absorb nutrients. Okay. Now let's look at the second type of what's being absorbed. There are these things called the carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are essentially sugars. So our digestive system breaks down carbohydrates into simple sugars like glucose or fructose. So the carbohydrate digestion begins in our mouth. So this is the only sort of macromolecule that is broken down in our mouth. So the enzyme in our saliva called the amylase. Amylase breaks down larger starch into smaller sugars. And this digestion also happens more in the small intestines, where the enzyme, the amylase, again from the pancreas and the intestinal wall, continue to break down carbohydrates into glucose. So the mouth is where the larger these large molecules get broken down in our mouth. And these smaller ones get broken down further into the smaller sugars like glucose or fructose. So this is the process of breaking down carbohydrate. So yeah, so here, first it happens in our mouth from our saliva. Then from our pancreas, the amylase enzyme is also put into our small intestines. So it is broken down also in the small intestine. And carbohydrate and this simple sugar like glucose, fructose is also absorbed by the villi. And we've talked about villi before. So these small things like a little bit like a worm that are these little protrusions in our intestines, small intestines, where carbohydrates and many other nutrients get absorbed. So that was carbohydrate digestion. And finally, let's look at fat digestion. If you eat something fatty or has a lot of fat, the most fat digestion happens in the small intestine with the help of bile. So we introduce bile and pancreatic lipase. So the small amount of fat digestion begins in the stomach, actually, first. But it is further broken down in our small intestines. So bile is from the liver and produced by the liver, and it breaks down larger fat into smaller ones. This process is called the emulsification. And then the other enzyme, the lipase, lipase that are produced by the pancreas, breaks down fat molecules into smaller bits like fatty acid and glycerol. This is just a basic outline of what happens in fat digestion. So here I have a diagram here showing how fat is absorbed. So there are different organs acting to digest fat. First is the liver that produces bile. So bile is stored in the gallbladder, and then when fat is detected, the gallbladder squeezes out the bile and puts it in our small intestines. And that breaks down the fat. And there are also, remember, the pancreatic juice. The lipase from the pancreas also breaks down fat. And everything happens in this first part of our small intestines. And this first part, for your reference, is called the duodenum. To maybe section off some of the small intestines, Most nutrient digestion that we've talked about occurs in the first part of the small intestines, and they're called the duodenum. It's where the pancreatic enzymes and bile break down food into small molecules. Then, after it is broken down in the duodenum, it moves into the jejunum and the ileum, which absorbs the nutrients. All of these, other parts absorb the nutrients. And finally, of course, the large intestine absorbs water and forms feces. Now let's look at this question. The last couple questions before we end today. So, the first step in the digestion of fats in the body is that
The answer is D. Exam.
oh, yes. The answer is B. If you said B, that's correct. So, here I have a picture right here. So, remember that both bile and lipase breaks down fat. So this first part is all correct. But the digestion happens in the duodenum. Remember, it happens in the duodenum. So fats are broken down in the duodenum, and it is absorbed in the jejunum and the ileum. So it's not the gallbladder. No. Gallbladder stores bile. It's not a place of digestion. Lipase doesn't break down in the pancreas, no. Lipase is produced in the pancreas and released into the duodenum. It's not the ileum. We said ileum takes part in absorbing nutrients. So yeah, great job for anyone who said B. Let's look at this one more question. So what is the end product of the digestion of each of the following? I did put the answers already here because this is just to summarize. But meats have abundant proteins. And proteins, remember, their end product is the amino acids. And cassava, for example, is abundant in starch or carbohydrate. The end product is the glucose, or maybe even fructose or smaller sugar. Lastly, we have the palm oil. Whenever you eat or take in oil, you are eating fat. So oil has a lot of fat, right? And the end products after digestion are fatty acids and glycol. So this might be a little confusing, so I put a summary slide here for you to look at. So there are 3 nutrients that we've talked about: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Carbohydrates comes from foods like rice, bread, cassava, potato, yam, fufu, banku. All of those have carbohydrates. And digestion of carbohydrates happen first in our mouth by our saliva. Remember, the enzymes are called the amylase. Enzymes called amylase in both our mouth and our small intestine breaks down carbohydrate. And finally, the end product is the glucose or the fructose, the small sugar. These are small ones. And the small sugars can be diffused or absorbed in our small intestine, in the jejunum, or ileum. So that is the carbohydrates. Then we have the proteins. Proteins, things like beans, fish, meats, eggs, and milk are abundant in proteins. They're digested in our stomach a little bit and also in our small intestine.
Yeah, Mom.
The end product are amino acids. They're the smaller components of proteins. And it is similarly diffused or absorbed by the jejunum or ileum in our small intestines. Okay, so the last one, we have fat or lipid. So oil, nuts, and butter, all of them have abundant in fat. They're digested in our small intestines with bile, remember? With bile and lipase. Bile is produced by the liver, and multiple lipase is produced by the pancreas. So you can see that digestion often happens in the small intestine for fats, and organs like liver and pancreas are involved in this digestion. They help in digesting fat. And fats are broken down into smaller parts called fatty acids and glycerol. And finally, it is diffused, or it sometimes requires active transport because it is nonpolar. It is like repellent from all the liquid that is inside, so it needs to be pushed in, basically. But all of this digestion and absorption happens in the small intestines. So that was it for today. So yeah, do you have any questions for me today about anything that we've covered? So yeah, any questions for me?
Ask your question.
I mean,
It's done. Come forward. I'm here. I'm here.
Oh. What is the meaning of amylase?
Oh, you're asking about the amylase. Okay. So let's go back. Yeah, here. So amylase is an enzyme. So amylase here, it's a type of enzyme. So enzymes are what helps break down things. So amylase is an enzyme that breaks down carbohydrates, things like sugar. All the sugar that you eat is broken down by amylase. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions for me?
Oh.
Any other question? Who asked the question? Okay, that means.
Okay. Yeah.
Good question.
The main function of the larynx.
Oh, the main function of the larynx. Okay, let me go back. So the larynx was all the way back here. So yeah, this is the function of the larynx going back now. So the function of larynx is for producing voices. So it controls the sound of your voice. It also controls breathing, and the larynx also protects the airway. So when larynx closes, our body swallows the food and prevents the food from entering our windpipe. So these are the three main role of a larynx. Yeah. Yeah, does that make sense for everyone?
Any other question? Papa, if I want to be safe. It's not Papa you want. Okay, only one. So no other question, right? No?
Yeah, I have. Is the function of the trachea.
The function of the trachea. Okay, trachea, let's go back. So trachea is here. So trachea is basically an air passageway. So it helps transport the air that is breathed in from our nose or our mouth and helps it move down into our lungs. And trachea is divided into two parts at the end. And those we have studied are called bronchi. So the purpose of a trachea is to just function as an air passageway. And it's split at the end to bronchi to pass the air down to our lungs. Yeah, does that make sense? Yeah.
Who is that?
The meaning of deoxygenated blood.
Oh, you're asking about deoxygenated blood, right? So let's go back. So yeah, deoxygenated blood just means that there is low oxygen. You see here, deoxygenated blood means there's low oxygen and high carbon dioxide, high CO2, and low oxygen. So that's why the deoxygenated blood needs to go to our lungs, since our body needs oxygen. Every part of our body needs oxygen, so the deoxygenated blood goes to the lungs to get its oxygen. So, yeah. Okay. Any other questions for me today?
What's the function of impure vena cava? What's the function of impure vena cava?
Can you repeat that, please? Yeah.
Very good. What's the function of impure vena cava?
Oh, function of the inferior vena cava. Okay. So, inferior vena cava is just simply the blood vessel, the large veins that return to our heart. That is from the lower part of our body. So, vena cava, every vena cava enters our right atrium from the rest of our body. And the inferior vena cava is the vena cava that is from the lower part of our body. So after it collects all the deoxygenated blood, yeah, it enters the right atrium. Yeah, does that make sense for you? Yeah, so are there more questions for today? I do have the slides, so I will share the slides to you after this class.
What are the diseases that affect the
Hey, can you repeat that, please? I couldn't hear that.
diseases that affect the liver?
Sorry, I couldn't hear that. Right? It's a little bit glitchy. Uh, Sorry, can you repeat it one more time? I couldn't hear the question. Yes, hello?
They are talking about the diseases that can affect the liver.
Oh, the disease. Yeah, that can affect. Okay. Here, I talked about disease in the lungs over here. Okay. So going back to this slide, disease that could affect the lungs, these are just some examples, right? Things like pneumonia can be a disease for the lungs, influenza, tuberculosis, or even a common cold, a bronchitis, lung cancer, and COVID-19. And these are just listing of examples of what diseases a lung can have. So, yeah, are there any other questions for me today? You have more questions? Or I can show you a little bit more next week too, but
David,
yes.
yeah, they said, what are hormones?
Oh, they're asking what are hormones?
Yeah,
So
hormones.
hormones basically pass through our blood vessels. They're part of our blood, but they control and regulate most parts of our body. And it can control things like metabolism, the rate in which you digest, and they can also affect many other types of organs. So, yeah, those are hormones. Um,
All right. They are done. They are done.
okay, yeah.
I hope you're gonna send us slides, right?
Yes, I will send the
Okay.
slides. And
So next week, what do we have?
next week
Next
we'll
week.
be
Yes.
talking about the reproductive system, the DNA, and the cell. So we're talking about reproduction and DNA next week. So
Please write it for us, okay? David, please, it's raining, so if you could write it for us to see. We find it difficult hearing from you.
oh, I was just saying that next week,
Okay.
we will be studying the reproductive system and the human body, the DNA. Yeah, those are the topics for next week. And yeah, I'll see everyone next week. Yeah, bye everyone.